listening to Blind Shovel, an arts and music podcast. Today I speak with percussionist and podcast producer Michael Wimer. Hope you enjoy.
Check. Mic check.
Yeah. All right, so we'll get into it one sec. So where were you born again?
I was born at St. Vincent's Hospital in Carmel, Indiana.
Oh, you're really from Indiana?
Yeah. Although I'm from Carmel, which is a bougie suburb of Indianapolis that everybody else in Indiana hates.
Really?
Yeah.
So, and then you went to school in Indiana?
Yeah, I went to school in Indiana University, Bloomington.
Yeah. So most of your life is Indiana, or has been so far?
Pretty much, yeah.
And what does it mean? What is it like to be from Indiana?
When I was in elementary school, we did like I think it was fourth grade. Every year they do a play about the Indiana state history, and there's a lot of great history to Indiana. But at the end, they'd have every student list off a celebrity born in Indiana, and there's a ton. Like, there's Michael Jackson, there's James Dean, there's Larry Bird.
True.
Yeah, Jack Dillinger.
Now, Michael Jackson's really Indiana, he lived
Gary,
there?
Indiana. So
Gary,
you could say that's a suburb of Chicago.
Okay.
But I claim Hoosier.
Okay. But what is it? How is it different from New Jersey? Is it noticeable? Is there cultural shock to going? I'm assuming you've been to LA.
Yeah, I've been to LA. I've been to San Francisco briefly. New Jersey, the greater New York City area, and San Francisco feel very similar in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. In that they're northern, cold port cities,
right?
Sprawling with a ton of immigrants, and whenever I go to San Francisco or New Jersey area, my mom's side of the family is Italian, so seeing all the Italian heritage everywhere and resonates a lot. But
so in Indiana, I'm assuming you don't see that mix of people.
No,
very much so.
There's people from everywhere, but especially the Midwest, it's assimilated American, deliberately assimilated Americans. And I Thaddeus Russell, the historian I work for, talks about this all the time. But the immigrants chose to be standard dominant society Americans, and you can sort of see these are the people who consciously chose to live middle of the road in some way.
Mm-hmm. So is it strange when you explain to people what you do in Indiana? What exactly is the most concise way to explain what you do?
I just say I'm a drummer.
Okay.
And there's a ton of drummer stereotypes, so that covers a lot of it. And then I say I work for a podcast run by a historian.
But you're not like a drummer in the sense of a rock drummer. Or could you be?
Yeah. I play for some rock bands. I'm playing for a blues band right now.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
But you studied... What did you study exactly?
Yeah, I studied... so I went to Indiana University and studied Afro-Cuban percussion when I got there. My degree was technically a classical degree because there's no such thing as an Afro-Cuban major. And when I was 18, I didn't even know what that stuff was, really. There was just a super charismatic professor, Michael Spiro, who was the first really white guy to go down to Cuba and figure that stuff out and methodically create a language of it for explaining it to Westerners.
So before it was not codified?
It's codified in Afro-Cuban traditions amongst themselves orally.
But not like a book?
Yeah, Spiro wrote some textbooks and did some DVDs and did clinic series. And he has an online website called congamasterclass.com where he very thoroughly uses words to describe what's happening and to the best of his capabilities.
And so really that one teacher setting you down this path?
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing.
Yeah. Well, also, my dad took me to see B.B. King when I was 10 years old. And I think that got me interested in the roots of music. And I see there being like a broad unifying theme for the music of the African diaspora. And I see all American pop music being rooted in the African diaspora and the experience of the spirit in some way.
And did this man, how many people were in this class where you were inspired by this man? I'm just curious if it was influential across the board or something in you was triggered by his charisma.
Well, he was super charismatic, super generous with his time, a super genuine person. Like one of the first people to like break through the artifice of the university and just treat people like human beings. He would teach group lessons. So as opposed to normally you have one-on-one time with your professor, an hour a week that you're promised, but he would do group lessons of like 3 to a dozen people maybe, because that's the only way this music can really be done. It's not really a solo thing. And those would go on for like 3 hours at a time. They just go until he's done.
Yeah, even in art school, it was hard to collaborate because of the grading system. You know, like, not until after art school did I collaborate with artists visually on comics, Neve, etc. So, like, it's interesting to hear about that because they're really de-incentivized from that kind of thing. They're trying to isolate you, judge you, almost in like a laboratory sense.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, like the transactional nature of the university is you are purchasing a degree from them individually that is going to give you something for your individual career.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that makes sense. But so going into college, you just knew you liked music, but you didn't know specifically what you were trying to get into.
Yeah, I guess I always wanted to be a conventional rock drummer.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And you started doing that young?
Yeah, I started doing that as soon as like, I guess like in middle school when they put you in band for like concert band. I wanted to do percussion, and I wanted to do that because I wanted to play drums in a rock band. And
do you fit the stereotype of a drummer? I don't think you do. I'm not sure though.
I've got long hair right now, so that's part of it. I mean, all the drummer jokes are like, what did a drummer get on his SAT? Drool.
Yeah, I think we've told that one on this before, actually. Because I have a friend who's a drummer, and we were just trying to suss out what is the drummer stereotype. Like, there seems to be each instrument draws people in for different reasons.
Yeah, there's the Muppets animal.
Sure.
Yeah.
You're not that, right?
No, I'm not. I was that probably when I was 13, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, you were high energy?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Yeah. I'm very low energy now, I think.
Well, what about the Afro-Cuban stereotype of the drummer? Are there different, how like niche does this get? Is this like this guy on this kind of drum is like this kind of guy?
Oh, I mean, yeah, each little role that you play in like an ensemble has its own stereotypes to it, like especially in the religious context. But the Cuban stereotype is, you know, super forward, like aggressive, loud. I was talking with Dana McCurdy, who does drum circles here, and he sat in on a session with Dizzy Gillespie and Mario Bauza, like the pioneers of Latin jazz, when he was programming synthesizers for them. And he told a story about Mario Bauza just yelling at Dizzy Gillespie, telling him, like, no, you can't change this part. You can't. Like, this is right. This is what it is. It's very assertive, very certain about things.
Yeah, so how does that, we talked about that earlier off air, but how does that relate to this idea that there's a right part or correct part after this and so forth, like this formal structure? Does it also have a more improvisational element, or is this really like a structured mathematical way of playing?
Okay, so in Lukumi, Yoruba, Santeria, Bata drumming, there's 3 drums, and those drums play melodies in between each other in like interlocking patterns. There's like, let's say 6 sounds you can get out of these double-sided headed drums and different pitches, and that creates melodies in between them. And those melodies correspond to words of songs or prayers, literal prayers to deities. And you have to play the part exactly right, or you're not saying the correct words.
It's like, summoning a spell or witchcraft. Like, I assume there's like a procedural thing that has to occur.
Yeah. That's a Western way of looking at it, is calling it witchcraft.
I'm imagining like you got
There's a lot of baggage to it.
Three chicken eggs, unborn child, whatever, a feather from a rooster, like this kind of recipe to evoke the spirit.
But I'm trying to think.
Well, let's say you're not calling it witchcraft.
Or not even that, like just think like jazz, like you're playing like what was melodies to show tunes originally. So I mean, in jazz, like you do your own thing and you obfuscate the show tune as much as possible, but you're still playing the show tune at the heart of it. So
I guess I'm trying to understand how robotic, you might say, it is, how sectioned off and pre-prescribed it is, and then how improvisational it can be, etc.
My teachers will tell you it's straight up classical music, and they try to eliminate the aspect of improvisation as much as possible.
Those two, like, I don't know a ton about these things, but so can I roughly say that classical has no improvisational elements, and then jazz is heavily improvisational?
Yes, but there's trappings of that because like Bach and Mozart were incredible improvisers and
live.
When they were alive. And because they're dead and we don't have live recordings of them, all we have is what they wrote down.
Okay.
And so people just worship on that altar of what they wrote down. But like, there's wild performers like Leonard Bernstein as a conductor who would do things that aren't in the score at all and would almost have an improvisatory nature to how he handled the orchestra.
But he had written that structure down, and then he's improvising on top live. Is that correct?
He would just take risks, usually deliberately, but sometimes even in the moment of like what to do with tempo and what to do with volume and intensity of the pieces. That has nothing to do with what's on the page, and sometimes is the opposite of what it's telling you to do.
Interesting. Okay, yeah, that's complicated, but let's go back to the idea that your professors would say, or most of them, suggest that it is like classical, it is strict in some sense.
Yeah.
Is that how you approach it?
That's something that I definitely aspire to, and that I should be more disciplined about doing, for sure. Now, I think the music has to have a sense that it's alive.
Sure.
So there are little areas where you can improvise, where you can ornament things. This happens in Bata drumming, but the secular music, rumba,
What's Bata?
Bata is 3 hourglass-shaped drums that play interlocking melodies that accompany religious ceremonies for Lukumi, Yoruba, Santeria.
Okay.
Yeah. Rumba is conga drums, just generic drums played in the streets for partying and just socializing. And there's a game to it in which there's conventional melodies, but you want to improvise, call and response to each other. And it's a game of trying to not step on each other's toes, to never play at the exact same time as somebody else, and to create like an aggregate of all the drums together spontaneously.
Okay. And so is that, yeah, I mean, it's, so I'm trying to grasp, the majority of your time is spent playing one type of music, or are you just all over the place as a drummer in general?
Personally, I'm all over the place. I've stuck to practicing traditions. I'm not super deep into the religion myself. Like, I'm not initiated, but I've been studying it to keep up with it because I think it's something of great value, and something that informs the rest of my playing. Yeah.
So I'm trying to just parse out the fact that there's this secularized mode and then this religious mode. Mm-hmm. Is that really adhered to? Like, in other words,
it depends on the context, but
do you know what I mean though? Like, is
yeah.
it, because things tend to be all secularized at this point,
yeah,
and kind of detached and framed in a way where it's like, even if you're like, I remember being in Mexico and they showed us a ritual in this town, but it obviously wasn't a ritual. It was a performance of a ritual.
Yeah.
Which was even more depressing,
mm-hmm.
actually. For me, realizing, oh, there's no rituals really left in America, but then to come to a different country and be like, well, the ones that are left here are just like tourist performative moments was worse in some ways. So, like, can you play, if you're not initiated into this religion, can you play this kind of thing?
Not in the context of a ceremony.
So more in like a historical sense, like presenting something?
Yeah, I can present it and talk about it. I accompany dance classes, where basically in the 60s after the revolution in Cuba, the Cuban government sort of paid groups to form and to put on stage performances of the religious music as a cultural export and like something that they're proud of to show. The same thing happened with like djembe music after colonialization in the 20th century, where you take something traditional and you put it on the stage just as like a point of nationalist pride that this is something that you have.
Right. So do you feel a difference between, like, let's say you're drumming in a secular mode or a religious mode? Is there a clear distinction in these two practices? Or do you feel that? Or do you notice a difference in at least the individuals around or participants? Or is it just kind of, because if it's not, then it's kind of confusing to me.
Well, yeah, a religious context, I believe, should have a sense of reverence and a very strong set of intention behind it. Mm-hmm. So, like, for me, like with the Catholic Church, the point of a Mass is the miracle of the Eucharist. Mm-hmm. Like, you're trying to literally bring God into the body and blood of Christ to give to the parishioners. In Santeria, you're literally trying to call a spirit, an ancestor, Orisha, to mount somebody or, possess somebody, and then they'll be like a vessel with the community. So you're trying to bring that spirit down. So there's a very, very specific intention in a tambor, a traditional ceremony, that you have to adhere to. So, like, I think the best entertainers understand that music is a technology with that kind of power, and they have similar aspirations of the kinds of frenzies that they want to put their audience into.
Yeah. It isn't clear who they channel, though. That would be the distinction.
Yeah, I mean,
unless they're channeling themselves at a higher plane or something. I don't understand. Like, if you're saying in this practice, there's a specific ancestor?
Yeah.
One specific ancestor?
Usually like one per ceremony, but it depends. It's, but Yeah, usually there's a whole pantheon of deities, and you're trying to call them down.
Are they all benevolent?
I consider them morally neutral.
Okay.
Just like human beings in their, if you want to put a moral temperament behind them, I consider them, they're probably benevolent in that they probably should feel some love to the community that is offering things to them. But, you know, if they get disrespected, they're not going to take that kindly. So.
Like disrespected in the bad summoning practice?
Yeah. So, like, if you don't say their name correctly, they're not going to pick up the phone.
Yeah.
But if you have ulterior motives, if you have bad motives for bringing them down, they're probably, you know, not going to want to be a part of that. Or they're probably, you know, they might, the old stereotype of like a Faustian bargain or something, like biting you in the ass.
So what is your perspective on like contemporary pop? If it's using this technology, what is it exactly pulling from, or the frenzies? What are they in the service of, or the celebration of, or is that too general of a category to really?
It depends on the artist. I mean, a lot of contemporary pop is very, very sterile.
From a spiritual perspective?
Yeah.
Sure.
Like, let's say Kendrick Lamar, for example.
Okay, yeah, good example.
Yeah, he constantly talks about the culture, and like on To Pimp a Butterfly, he invokes Tupac to where he plays a interview of Tupac and intersperses himself with Tupac as if he's like actually with the spirit of Tupac in that moment. And yeah, I think he kind of considers Tupac to be like a spiritual ancestor to him.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Music.
Well, that's a very literal moment, actually, now I'm thinking about it. Like, yeah, I'm trying to imagine if you look at like...
well, real quick, in the Drake beef, the Drake-Kendrick beef, the moment that Drake really messed up and like provoked Kendrick to where he has to respond in a violent way was when he used an AI voice of Tupac to insult Kendrick. Like to Kendrick, that's like a religious dishonoring my ancestors. Like that's a deep, deep, deep level of disrespect that needs to be met with war.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So in To Pimp a Butterfly, I don't recall, it's been a long time, but I believe Kendrick is just kind of placing himself within a pre-existing interview.
Yeah.
He's not generating words from Tupac. He's using his original responses.
Yeah. And then Kendrick sort of dramatizes it as if he's like reading a poem that I believe a dead friend of Kendrick's wrote. So there's like another layer of spirit that he's invoking with that. Yeah.
Well, Kendrick is on another level. I'm trying to think of... That's like, he seems very conscious of what he's doing. Yeah. I don't know if a lot of pop stars are. They seem to be in the service of some other thing.
Yeah. I think, I mean, typically, like, the stereotype is you sold your soul to the devil. And a lot of pop stars just wanted to be a famous pop star. And
yeah, I'm beginning to think that's a pretty literal thing.
Yeah.
In the sense of it's all about them, it's all about their image, the flesh, etc. And they do literally sign away their expression.
Yeah.
The rights to that expression. So I don't even think it's a metaphor.
No, not at all. Yeah.
But then the question becomes, who can navigate that thing? Like, it sounds like you respect Kendrick. Is that fair?
Yeah. I kind of, it's a mixed bag with him.
Yeah.
Because he is not critical of the liberal hegemony, and like he's Barack Obama's favorite contemporary rapper. And
well, it isn't clear to me always what he doesn't seem like he's on a political side.
No.
Like the Black of the Berry is interesting from that perspective.
Yeah.
Because I don't think most rappers would be comfortable sending that message, you know?
Yeah, he's and then like on Mr. Morale, he has that song Savior where he says I'm not your savior, and he says all these pop stars are not your savior, and he's like explicitly rejecting that. Don't put that on me. But he also wears a literal crown of thorns on that. Mm-hmm. And he goes on tour with a crown of thorns on, and to me that's when he like jumped the shark a little bit. And
you're saying that's like idolatry in his own framing?
Yeah, I think putting himself like Jesus like that in such an overt way is, it's just real. To me, it is.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
Yeah,
by his own metric, in a sense.
Yeah,
like him versus Kanye in those different frames is interesting to me. Mm-hmm. The way that they both might express their own form of idolatry about themselves.
Yeah.
In a very different way. And you might argue Kanye's more honestly, he just says like, I am God, or I am X, Y, or Z. Like I am the ultimate. Where Kendrick always seems to maintain a position of not plausible deniability, but like, I don't know how to word it with him. He's classy in a certain way that Kanye has no interest in being.
Yeah. Kendrick does play some sort of sense of respectability politics, but he also, he kind of puts his culture. He does like commodify his culture a lot. Like he's very aware that he's perpetuating and selling stereotypes of Black people to a largely white audience. Like if you listen to the voicemails on Good Kid, Mad City, where it's like his dad going, like playing a game of dominoes and like
sure
drinking Hennessy and I want your booty, like all that. Like it's just, I think Kendrick knows that he's commodifying that, and it gives him a big sense of guilt that he has to reckon with throughout his music. But
that makes it interesting.
Yeah,
but also it's like it isn't clear. Sometimes you live within a stereotype, and it's just your personal experience. And to lie about that would be dishonest on both fronts. So maybe he's just speaking from that. I don't know what his personal experience is, obviously, but it could overlap quite a bit, especially when you're young and in that setting.
Yeah. But I think Ye is a lot more shameless and a lot more uninhibited with it.
Yeah, it isn't clear when he would feel shame about what. But I think Kendrick actually has like a reflective nature, which makes for interesting moments. I don't know. The one thing I remember on that one, is it Mr. Morale? The one with Eckhart Tolle?
Oh, yeah, the therapy album.
Yeah, that made me laugh a lot.
Yeah.
I just, something was very dissonant about that. But now that you mention it, it's like...
That's like an NPR album. That's like an episode of Radiolab.
Well, exactly. I never really considered his audience, like who really listens to Pimp a Butterfly and what context is it played in. Obviously, it's not as much of a... It doesn't have...
You're not going to hear To Pimp a Butterfly in the club. You might
coming out of a car.
Yeah.
So that's they both play that game in a sense, though. Like, this is very tangential, but Kanye just pulls like pretty much freshman year art school moves often, but it's considered genius because it's in the context of a rapper or like, and it's very funny to me. Like, just kind of extracting, I don't know, conceptual ideas that aren't actually that impressive and putting them in the rap context can often be mind-blowing to people reviewing them.
Oh, that's why I feel some kindredness with Ye, is he's a Midwesterner. To tie it back, is he's like, he's like a Midwestern art school guy. His mom was a professor, and he takes from the hood because he likes the aesthetics of it, and he's playing the game of hip hop. But Ye made Midwestern polos and backpacks, which was what all the preppy kids when I was in school dressed like already. He made that cool for that era.
Yes, and he made it very clear that he made that cool. But that actually is a part we can jump off from that, the racial aspect, how often are you, I assume this would only ever happen in an academic setting, but like, obviously you're a white guy playing this music with a certain history. How often is that even an issue or even brought up? Is it an invisible thing, or is it just a quick joke and then it's set aside and then you're playing the music together?
Well, I live in a college town, and I work with the university a lot. So I kind of constantly think about it, and I kind of constantly have to confront it and be able to assert myself and know the dynamics at play and navigate the landmines of it. But I've made way more friends than enemies by just sincerely saying I love this and I want to contribute to it. And there's a guy, Nicholas Payton, who's a trumpet player, a jazz trumpet player. And he's very pro-black, and he asserts that jazz should be called Black American music, BAM.
I just interviewed a jazz musician and that was mentioned.
Oh, yeah?
Which I said that jazz is a perfect name, I think.
Oh, interesting.
BAM is a stupid sounding. I don't like from a George Carlin perspective, I don't like these acronyms that have to be unpacked and explained. I think, I don't know, something where like jazz just works.
Yeah, it's just that onomatopoeic noise that you guys make. Yeah.
But I also just like double Z's. I'm generally a fan of that in words.
But the thing about Nicholas Payton is one time in an interview I heard him say, yeah, man, I'd love to have more black students and more black people involved in this music, but everybody who knocks on my door asking for a trumpet lesson is white. So I'll teach those people because those are the people interested in it. And if I don't teach them, my art form will die.
Right. So he's just being pragmatic. Are you analogizing that? Like that's similar with the Afro-Cuban stuff?
I think that's the case. Because like, this is a very esoteric, like, cultural study that is either only capable in its original context that will exist in the underground forever. But to know it at this level, like, you have to get intellectual about it. And so it's only happening at universities in this detached form.
Right.
Which is how I got to it.
That's required in a sense because it couldn't be found in its natural setting anymore?
Oh, it can be found in its natural setting, for sure.
So if you went to Cuba...
But how am I going to know about that? How am I...
You can't.
A white guy from a posh suburb going to know about... Yeah.
Well, I also don't even understand Cuban history enough to know pre-revolution, post, how that would impact music or this kind of music and how that would evolve, or how this teacher that you had would have visited Cuba or when he would have visited Cuba, etc. So there's a lot of roadblocks to engaging, at least in the past, I assume. But I mean, I asked the question from the perspective of, I don't think anyone talks about cultural appropriation who's a good artist. Good artists are excited by the prospect of unification, and when people play music together, they're rarely critical if they're good. The love just, or whatever you want to call it, it definitely transcends these kind of nonsense political concepts that are divisive at their root. The whole, I mean, I don't even know, can you speak to that? Like, I think cultural appropriation is largely a stupid idea that it's not even used much anymore. But maybe in your context, you encounter it.
Yeah, I think like the concept of cultural appropriation, like cultural appropriation is itself culture. That's just how culture works. Like, it's
a part of, an evolution of culture. Japan is like, from my ignorant perspective, seems to be the king of stealing things and making them better, and in an unashamed sense, like taking Chinese things and refining them, and they seem to revel in making something better that is laying around and maybe isn't optimal yet.
To me, there's a right and wrong way of doing it, though, and there's definitely a way to be exploitative about it or to not give the originators their flowers. Like,
so break that down, because of course theft is bad.
Yeah.
that's to me obvious, right? If you make an album, I think Paul Simon was accused of this. If you make an album and don't really credit the people who were on the album, that's just bad.
Well, I defend Paul Simon because he put those people in their liner notes and like.
So what is the issue there? I actually don't know the full context, but what exactly is wrong with what he did?
I don't think there's anything wrong with what he did. I think what he did was great. There's an album, Rhythm of the Saints.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
It might be the best, my favorite album by him. Maybe not the best, but it's amazing.
Yeah. But he credits Olodun. He credits Francisco Aguabea. He credits everybody he works with, at least in the liner notes. So anybody willing to do 5 minutes of research can figure out who these guys are. And it was a big boom for all their careers at the time.
But he was encountering this idea early at this stage, right? He was being accused of certain things.
I don't know what it was like at the time.
Yeah.
I think he was well received at the time. Now, I think in the broader context now, looking back on it, some people might accuse him of being, like with Graceland, that he was at a stage where his career was kind of dying and he went to South Africa and like stole their sound. And
that's very cynical.
Yeah. But if you listen to Paul Simon's music, he's always incorporated sounds from all over the world to write really, really amazing songs. And
that seems to be the fundamental misunderstanding from a non-artist. I think that you really think, like even talking about your life or something, nobody is going to dedicate their entire life to a craft that is grueling to just steal another culture's, like to cynically extract and steal the culture's essence. They probably just genuinely love the thing or inspired by it. And maybe at times they clunkily apply it to their career or not. But art is it's a lifetime pursuit. You wouldn't just do it out of some weird cynical motive that is strictly political like that. I don't think.
Yeah. No, I mean, this is why I don't like. This is why I have mixed feelings about Kendrick now. Is like he said in Not Like Us that Drake, you're a colonizer. You're not an artist. You're a colonizer. And I'm like, well, Drake has popularized and given air to a lot of great artists that wouldn't have mainstream appeal if they weren't given this pop vehicle in the first place.
Drake is a good example of this.
Yeah,
he's an interesting example in a lot of ways. I mean, being Canadian. Right there. That is the antithesis of the American rapper. But also, is he Jewish or half Jewish?
Yeah. His mom's Jewish, right? Yeah.
Okay.
And so he's Jewish. He reps that.
Well, I was I don't care about this beef much, but I was also just like, under what pretext did anyone ever think Drake was like a real hard rapper? And now he's being called out for not being so. I don't even think of him as a rapper.
That's funny.
Yeah.
I think if you're reading this, it's too late. That mixtape he did in 2015, he definitely pivoted to being more of a rapper. But for him, what he says is that he was never that hardcore gangster guy until he got a ton of money and until he was in the hip hop world and people were coming after him. So I think it's like an authentic expression of what it's like to pretty much operate in the gang world that is the music industry, full of backstabbing and money, power, politics,
Yeah. But so, like in everyday, it's a very complicated topic, but in the anecdotal sense, in the daily, is it even a thing you have to think about, or is it irrelevant? Like, that you're a white guy who plays this music that's very clearly not white.
Yeah. Well, again, I would have to the only way, if I were to have a music career, to avoid that, I would have to be a white supremacist in a European orchestra.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Wimer.
Yeah. And there are no orchestras that are explicitly Western chauvinist.
Right.
Really. They are under the surface, but they're all run by establishment liberals who have certain feelings about race that undermine that.
Yeah. But on the daily, it's not an issue, right? I assume it's just not an issue.
It's really not an issue. It really isn't. No.
What in the I could see maybe in the academic setting it being brought up, but Yeah, I have found that people just genuinely like to celebrate their culture, their quote unquote, because oftentimes they're very mixed with other people.
Yeah.
And again, if you dedicate your life to something, people are only going to respect that.
I play in a soul band too, R&B group full of like black guys that are at least 65 years old.
Nice.
And they played with funk groups like the Ohio Players at some point in their career, I think. And I think even Anita Baker, the guitar player, played for her at some point. But all they do is barbecues. And cool. Yeah, I'm been in many cases where I'm the only white person there. And the worst thing that happens is that I get made fun of for having a good credit score.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Do you have a good credit score?
Yes.
Okay. Impeccable.
Yeah.
What is it? 700?
7 something. I haven't checked because every time you check, it gets lower. Yeah.
Really?
I think because like that's a request.
Cool. That's kind of cool. I like that idea. Yeah. No, it's just an interesting. But you also, I'm trying to understand because you're not like a normal drummer, right? Like sometimes I will interview like a rock drummer or something. So there's a distinction. I guess you put it clearly that you're seeking the root or the fundamental nature of drumming, which would then put you in Africa.
Yeah.
In different forms.
Yeah.
And so that's why I don't like framing things racially often. It's like your motive has nothing to do with that. It's about the fundamental nature of the practice.
Yeah. Like the Romans stole drums from Africa when they invaded Africa, and they heard that the armies were organizing themselves by playing drums over long distances and communicating formations to get into.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've always been fascinated by like war instruments. And drums are obviously the drums of war.
Yeah.
So they looked at them from a utilitarian perspective.
Yeah. So like if I were to be a totally white drummer, I would be still playing something that was culturally appropriated thousands of years ago with the modern military drumming. Yeah.
It's never ending.
Yeah.
You couldn't even play drums, actually.
Yeah.
And of course, when you're like a white dude in a suburb, well, I don't even know, what you would be, how you could escape this notion, being appropriating something, because you're not really in anything.
Yeah. I could maybe aspire to play in John Cougar Mellencamp's band, but still that's like rock and roll. And like he's stealing from James Brown. He's stealing from everybody.
Yeah, I mean, theft in that context is very interesting to me, especially with copyright. I think I'm for copyright, but I also think it's kind of difficult to navigate that as an artist. Like you're going to, especially with music, which seems far more mathematical and kind of structured than visual art. I am always fascinated by when you hear, oh, this Strokes song sounds exactly like this. What was it? Was it John Cougar? No. I don't know. The Strokes have been accused many times of playing other people's songs. And it's just an interesting idea of like, ideas they come from the ether, it seems. So yeah, I don't think people sit down and they say, I'm going to steal this or I'm going to copy this exact thing. Maybe there are some artists like that.
Led Zeppelin.
Yeah, you would say Zeppelin.
Yeah, but they stole from white artists too. They stole from like white folk artists that would go on tour with them as well.
So what is stealing in this context? Because I think that's the heart of what we're talking about is theft, right? It's like theft versus collaboration maybe is the valid distinction in cultural appropriation. If you're just stealing versus collaborating in the culture, I think that's kind of valid there. But what is Led Zeppelin doing that it's so overt? They're like, oh, we've heard this song and now this is our song. Yeah.
Like Stairway to Heaven, like they stole from a folk act that opened for them, like the signature riff of all that. Now, I mean, to be fair, they turned it into like a 7-minute rock odyssey with like a bunch of different things. But the riff that everybody knows it for, I forget what the name of the band is, but they totally stole that. Yeah, they stole so much stuff from blues singers, and they didn't credit them really at the time at all.
Right, so that would be the distinction.
Yeah. To me, a band that did it well was the Rolling Stones. Like, we're going to call ourselves the Rolling Stones. That's an obvious Muddy Waters reference. We're going to take the original blues artists that were taken from on tour with us to put some money in their pocket.
Right.
And when these forefathers die, we're going to help pay for their funerals. Which is something the Rolling Stones did. I think they did that for Howlin' Wolf. And, yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, there's no harm in doing that. But it's a question I often ask musicians is, like, I think part of the podcast is getting people to know artists and what they're making. But when someone's a part of something like we discussed earlier, it isn't as clear how to deliver their essence, as opposed to like if someone's like an illustrator or comic artist, this is what they make. You can look at it. You can see them in it. But if someone wanted to encounter your drumming isolated in this kind of laboratory sense, how would that occur? Are there like bands out there? Like what is, if you, at this point in your life, how old are you?
28.
Okay. Is there an essential Wimer moment that is the most clear crystallization of what you've worked on? And could it be experienced, recorded, or not?
Maybe. Yeah.
And does that bother you? Some people, it's like, no, this is part of, like, music is collaborative. I'm not trying to make, like, the Michael Wimer album.
No. I mean, I might have probably thought about that a lot more when I was, like, 18.
Of course, yeah.
But, no, my belief is that you just do what you do until you die, and then the chips just fall where they may as to how it's received or what people say about it. You just do it. That's all. So
what do you, like in that sense, if I wanted to listen to a song to know what you do, does it exist?
I just released a single with a group called Palo Negro, which is the people I play with the most in Bloomington. It's a Colombian musicology professor who can write some pretty memorable melodies. And the song's called Ringy Ringitos, and I believe it's about his just twin boys just playing around. And it takes a lot of different styles from Latin America, and I think that's a good distillation of what my playing was, like, let's say 2020 to 2023, let's say.
And when you say it's about these twins, you just mean that there's no words in it, or there is?
There's like a little like nonsense thing that he created that he recorded his twins saying before.
But that's really just the narrative of the...
Yeah, it's just the narrative of the piece.
Playing.
Yeah, and how me and the piano and bass and drums interplay with each other.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, it's an interesting sacrifice. I mean, animators experience this too, right? Like, they might work on a film for 3 years and their effort is more obscured than a person who makes their own book. It's just interesting to me from the arts perspective what each person needs. Like, some people need to be seen as a singer-songwriter, and they're that person. Some people are completely fine being a part of a bigger something, and that's it. So it sounds like the latter for you.
Yeah, I don't know if that's just because I haven't like wanted to do like a solo project or had motivation to do that. It's kind of soul crushing whenever I get alone behind a laptop. And
Interesting.
Yeah, like, to me, screens are just something that like sucks the soul out of me at this point.
Of course, yeah.
But
no, that makes sense. I mean, if the foundation of what you currently practice is about working together, then yeah, of course, sitting in front of a screen is not going to conjure any inspiration for you.
Yeah, I made Indiana Doomer music during the lockdown.
I don't know what that is. What's a Doomer?
So Doomer, you know, like the Wojak memes.
It's like
there's like the stencil drawings that would be on 4chan as like memes.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. There's one called the Doomer, which I believe is like 26 or 28 canonically. He wears a beanie and a sweatshirt and has a sullen expression and is smoking a cigarette.
Okay.
And
he has a genre, or you made the genre?
I didn't make the genre. I made the Indiana variation of the genre. Genre. And the first encounter I saw was Russian Doomer music, where they like would play old music from the Soviet Union, like rock and pop tunes from like the 80s in the Soviet Union, and they'd put like grainy filters on it, and then they'd like put like pictures of the Wojak and an abandoned building and just sullen and sad. And
I can't imagine what this sounds like.
yeah, it's literally like John Cougar Mellencamp slowed down,
Okay.
pitched down with rain and radio effects on it. And it was just like to encapsulate what it felt like being stuck in Indiana when it felt very dead.
But so even in this solo pursuit, there's some ironic positioning, no?
Yeah.
Or
I'm not sure. It was probably very sincere. It was kind of like a love letter. There's a couple that I think are genuinely beautiful in the melancholy way. I did, what is it? She's Out of My Life by Michael Jackson.
Mm-hmm.
And the picture is the Michael Jackson house behind a beautiful sunset. And the Wojak is a little bit more anime defined. I did.
So how would someone listen to that? What's that?
It's on YouTube. If you find my YouTube Michael Wimer page, it's like 30 views maybe.
Okay.
But yeah, Indiana Doomer music.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So actually, is 4chan, was that part of your youth?
I've never really been on 4chan.
Or that, like, I feel like you're too young for that.
Maybe, yeah. Like the people I know are on 4chan are like 5 years older than me, probably.
People are still on 4chan?
No, who were?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
right.
But they were the originators of all the meme content that we have now. Like all of our jokes come from there.
Right.
So,
is that a world you're interested in? The meme world? Considering you made an album that's based on a meme.
Yeah.
Like there has to be some level of interest.
I think so. I mean, I'm into dissident politics, and that is discussed and I'm interested in like uninhibited expression. And
right.
4chan was the intersection of that for like a decade, probably.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really interesting dichotomy, the fact that you're interested in that uninhibited expression of 4chan and the meme culture, etc., but then also really interested in this structured, historical Afro-Cuban drumming.
Mm-hmm.
It's a nice balance you have there.
Thanks.
Two extremes.
Yeah.
That I doubt they inform each other in any real sense, right? Besides being contained within your flesh vessel.
If I was like in math, if I was doing grad school, I might write a paper trying to connect them, but I'm not going to do that now. I think people are paradoxes, and
sure,
yeah,
they should be. No, I think honest people are paradoxes.
Mm-hmm.
I think dishonest people aren't. Dishonest people present a singular individual, a unified, well, falsely unified. I think actually there's nothing disjointed per se about a paradox. They're not contradictions.
Mm-hmm.
Different than that. I guess I would say they're harmonious contradictions, paradoxes in some sense. But dishonest people are very boring because they don't resonate with any of that, I find. They present to you an image, I guess. Usually an ideological image of what they want you to think they are or believe. So I don't find anything particularly strange about liking those two things. And on that tip, it's interesting to me that you would still be in the academic system, as I imagine you don't really find that to be...
Well, what am I? I'm like a W-2 or a W-9 employee. Like, I'm not a professor or
you're contracted labor, I guess?
Yeah.
Freelancer?
I just accompany classes. I just play music during dance classes. So.
But you went to that school, right?
I did, yeah.
And do you live near or around it?
Yeah, I'm like 15 minutes from campus.
But also the school gave you the introduction to this thing.
Totally, yeah.
So
another contradiction, yeah.
Well, what is your feeling about that experience, or schools in general, or college, I guess? It's a tough question, but
yeah,
having gone through it and being inspired, I feel like there's people who are pre-inspired, like before school, and then school either tries to kill that. I've seen people's inspiration destroyed by school. But then there's people like you who they know they like something of that nature, but then school actually
I think
distills it down.
I think school killed some of my stuff that I was inspired to do, but I just channeled it into something new that I found that I liked.
Yeah.
And I think school is most of its utility is the fact that it's a building full of people who are highly motivated and studying the same field. So if you can just get to the people in
Yeah.
the school, that's the best thing it can ever do for you. And beyond that, I have all these, the same academic criticisms that you hear about it being a scam and all that.
Yeah. Those are realities, not,
But,
not criticism.
yeah, if you're smart about it and you're smart about your finances, it's a great opportunity to meet motivated people.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
It's a vacuum outside of the real. Like, it gives people space. That's what's nice. If it's free.
Yeah.
Because it's not, the space is an illusion and it'll contract on you the moment you get out and you have debt.
Yeah.
But do you imagine, I mean, you're only 28, so that's pretty young, honestly, but are you so deep in the Afro-Cuban drumming that you imagine that would be your main line through life? Like, this is that fundamentally clicking that you could see doing it till the end of days? And is there that depth?
There's another layer of depth that I haven't done. Like, I haven't actually entered the religion. Like, I haven't become an initiate. I haven't, like, you have to wear all white for a year.
That's cool.
Yeah. And
do you have to stay clean?
Yeah, you have to stay clean in
Damn, that's
a bunch of sets. In certain settings, like, you can't be in groups of people that aren't in the religion. Like, you have to avoid crowds, and there's a lot of directives that some are personal to you as well from divination given to you. But yeah, it's a year of, like, being sort of born into the religion.
Yeah, that's so interesting to hear about, because I've talked to devotional artists, people who work at churches and things like that, but it is so rarely a component of any art practice anymore that there would be a religious initiation or anything seriously spiritual outside of personal new age woo-woo that combines various moral structures and aesthetics. But to hear that you would have to put something on the line tangibly.
Yeah, and, like, the people that you do it with you're inextricably connected with them, and they're like your family, and you have, like, deep personal obligations to them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do most of the people you play with, are they actually initiated and part of this thing?
So there's one ex-professor who is still in town that I play with a lot, Joe Galvin, and he's initiated and has been for 20 years now. But the other people mostly are just students who have heard about that there's this thing that happens here and checking it out through that.
And is it via your proficiency at drumming in these rituals that you would be accepted, or is there other, like, is that necessary in some sense?
No, I mean, anybody can join the religion.
Gotcha.
That, like,
what is the religion called again?
Regla de Ocha, I'd call it, but some people call it Santeria. Santeria is kind of a dated term, but Regla de Ocha.
Why is that dated?
Because Santeria sort of emphasizes the syncretism with the Catholic saints.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
And that was something that was done to hide the religion during colonial oppression. And that has sort of faded away a little bit. And people are more able to just outright say, I worship Shango. This is devotion to Elegua. This is a devotion to Oya, to just say those names outright. So Regla de Ocha, like the rules of the Orishas.
So Santeria would be doing that, but towards a saint.
Yeah, towards the Catholic saint that you're...
Oh, that's interesting.
That's syncretized with the deity.
Yeah, the only thing I know about Santeria is the Sublime song.
Oh, yeah.
Pretty much. And maybe there's I think there's a Disney film involving a frog.
The Princess and the Frog.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's Haitian. That's New Orleans.
Yeah,
voodoo.
Is that?
Yeah.
Oh, so is that not Santeria?
So that is...
You gotta parse it out for me.
Okay. So New Orleans, you got the French influence.
Yep.
And voodoo comes from Vodun or Fodu, which comes from Dahomey. And in Cuba, it's Arara traditions. And I know, like, my teachers also study that as well. I don't think they're initiated, but they have studied that pretty deeply. But that's another ethnic group that was brought over to the New World.
Okay.
And new traditions spawned off of that. They're kind of parallel, but their own thing.
Okay. So Santeria is not the term for the religion.
Yep. Santeria is Yoruba,
Gotcha.
modern day Nigeria.
Okay.
Ifa, also, like some people call the religion Ifa. And then there's the religion practiced in Africa, and sometimes Ifa is its own tract that's parallel. But there's a religion as it's studied in Africa, and there's a religion as it's studied in the New World, and sometimes that's like Protestants and Catholics.
Sure.
And you can't mix those sometimes even.
Do you think there'd be a ceiling if technically to your drumming if you did not get initiated?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
You got to be in it.
Yeah.
Like, you got to step from the intellectual to the embodied.
No, I'm totally doing a simulation or a simulacrum of the thing. I'm one step removed at least.
I find that it's very hard not to do that with everything in modernity.
Yeah, yeah.
You look at a sunset and it's hard not to see it as a screensaver sometimes.
Yeah.
Especially if you've been on a screen for, I don't know if it's just me, 3-4 hours, and then there's a division that occurs. You're not always conscious of, I feel.
Oh yeah.
Things become narrativized and kind of distant. And as an artist, you're already doing that, basically. I feel like part of being an artist is a detachment. The ability to see the world without being swept away by it, I think. But I feel like computers and TV, etc., it's the flip side of that. It's the inversion of that. It's not a healthy detachment. It's like a prison or separation.
Yeah, totally.
No, that's cool. So what would stop you from doing it? It sounds like you should just do it.
Yeah, I know. No, it's really personal. I believe in the spiritual world, and I kind of want to be careful with how closely I get involved with that.
Yeah. But if they're like neutral, right? You were asserting that it's neutral.
Yeah.
I'm almost not buying that they're neutral.
Well,
can they be neutral?
It's not that they're neutral in that they're just like static or anything. It's just that I wouldn't call them evil and I wouldn't call them good. I would call them,
sure,
they have like the same emotions that a human being would have, is how I understand it.
Okay.
Because at some point in time, they were actual historical figures that were kings and queens of Yoruba land at one point.
Oh.
But also they are they're associated with forces of nature, which they can be generative or they can be destructive depending on when they come in.
Right. Well, and in your relationship to them. It's like if they can talk back.
Yeah.
They might go either way, it sounds like. But so on top of this, do you live off of drumming?
I could live maybe out of a van, or I could be in debt, or I could not save any money.
If you just drummed.
If I just drummed, yeah, I could.
Is that generally true for what's going on here? Or can you get to a level where you're making a living? Or does it have to be in an academic context? Like, how do you make money doing this, especially if it's a ritual, not a entertainment?
Well, the ritual thing, if I were to get in the religion, you play services.
Okay.
And they pay you for that. They take care of you very well. And if you move to a place like Mexico City, where it's happening all day, every day, you can make more money than you would in I know somebody who says, yeah, I make more doing this than as a lawyer, but that's just because he's in Mexico City.
He's saying as a lawyer in Mexico City.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. It's a completely different world.
Yeah.
So would you consider physically moving to get deeper into the thing?
Yeah.
Like Cuba, would that be the most logical?
Well, Cuba, you can't, I don't think you can really move there.
Oh, no?
Yeah, there's still I think Trump put it on a terrorist funding descriptor, and
really,
you can go there to vacation. You can go there to research. I'm not sure if you can really move there or if you'd want to. Like, it's still a communist country. I'm not 100% sure about the immigration laws, but yeah, people are starving to death there right now.
So Mexico City would be like the logical.
Yeah, Mexico City would be logical, or Puerto Rico. Yeah.
And have you considered that?
I've considered Puerto Rico. If I were to get a grad degree, there's Puerto Rico's conservatory has an incredible drum set professor that does folklore on drum set, and incredible jazz drummer that I'd love to study with.
Yeah, there's something fun about your path because, at least for me making comics or drawing, there's no like real clear mentor to find. There's no regional place to go to find the guy or lady who's going to level me up, beyond my personal abilities. But with you, it sounds like there's these landmarks physically and as people that if you want to go there, you can seek it out in feels more like a heroic journey, more clearly delineated in that sense.
Yeah, Florida too, Miami.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes sense, yeah. So on top of this, you also do podcasting?
Yeah, I work for Thaddeus Russell, Unregistered. I work for you in the sense that I help put on this festival with Thad.
Yeah.
I'm now doing some consulting with some other people, helping them start up a podcast. And then during the summer, I still manual labor, move furniture for a moving company, which gives me some seasonal work.
Okay. Yeah, because I can't imagine podcasting makes much money either, right?
Yeah, not really.
How'd you get into that? It's just you like listening to podcasts?
Yeah, I was a curious guy, and when I was in college didn't provide the intellectual stimulation that I wanted. And I got all that from podcasts. And one of them was Thaddeus Russell's, and I kept listening to that. And then during COVID, he was teaching a course on Black history, and I took his course and asked some insightful questions, I guess, and took a couple other courses. And then he asked me to work for him after we just hit it off.
Nice.
Yeah.
And so do you see that going somewhere? Like, I assume that the main focus is the drumming, right?
Yeah. Probably.
That's the main passion.
Well, when COVID happened, I sort of told myself I can't depend on drumming.
Well, yeah, of course, yeah.
Because for some reason, the populace can be whipped up into a hysteria where they will never go outside again. And major cities that, like, I was planning on moving to New Orleans in 2020. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, New Orleans was one of the most repressive when it came to COVID laws, and like whether it's going to be a climate change lockdown or whatever excuse they come up with, if a lockdown comes back, I can't afford to put my life on hold for 2 years or hunker down in the same way. So the podcasting thing is nice because it's something that you can do remotely and get out on your own.
Of course. And I'm assuming you just taught yourself what was necessary.
Yeah. I listened to some interviews of like Mark Zuckerberg and like different, about their hiring process. And they said, we don't hire people with experience in our field. We just look for smart people, and then we just teach them how to do things. And that was like, there's no, like, in any field, just do it. Like, don't perceive there's a barrier. Just believe in yourself and your capabilities and do it.
I suppose that would have been true for the majority of human history, that you wouldn't have needed some credential to think you could do something, or to even start thinking you could do something.
Mm-hmm.
It makes sense to me. I'm sure that they want to mold individuals as well. So they would take a blank slate over someone who has an opinion, I'm sure, about
how it's done. Yeah.
There's pros and cons to that. Well, that's good. It sounds like you have like a good balance, because it's tricky relying on something that's strictly live not even entertainment, but because obviously church was closed during COVID, etc. In person. It seems like you have to play both sides nowadays. You have to be begrudgingly in front of a screen for some percentage of the day. And then hopefully you have the ability to interact with actual humans. Because I don't even know, like, we can end this on AI, which I don't love talking about, but it seems like I have to. Like, it's nice that you have a craft that is about something more than novelty.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think that's what's interesting from what I'm hearing is that there's a spiritual component, religious component, communal component, educational. Whereas AI will just, I assume, can generate wonderful, especially if it's kind of locked in, like mathematical.
Mm-hmm.
I assume it'll arrive at a place that can generate drum patterns that are satisfying, etc.
Oh, I think it already can. Not even AI, but like GarageBand or whatever, their drum machine, like their drummers, or like there's software that can follow a song pretty well and create a workable pattern.
Right.
So yeah, that's already a thing, but it's not about the patterns itself. It's the how, not the what.
Right.
Yeah. Because, and that's only a human thing, and that's can only be done with touch. And I don't think AI will ever get to the point where it can really emulate touch. And that's also super specific on what the room needs and what the scenario you're doing demands. Like, as a drummer, what are the audio, like, are you mic'd or not? Do you have a monitor or not? How many people are in the room? Are you trying to cover somebody up or not? Is it your solo? Like, that's all dynamic control. But like, I was talking about this over texting with a friend of mine, that the thing about Afro-diasporic music, a lot of it feels like it's propelling forward. This is something I really struggle with in my playing. It feels like it's ahead of the beat and propelling forward, but the tempo doesn't increase super fast. Sometimes the tempo will increase very, very slowly throughout the piece, but like you're constantly feeling like you're ahead of the beat. Whereas
I think I know what you mean. It's like 0.1. Obviously, the rhythm is consistent in some sense, but it's also pushing forward very, very subtly.
Yeah.
And increasing without even, like, can you perceive it? Like, how long would it take? You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
That's a very weird idea.
And that's like speech, that's like something that I think only humans can do. And it has to be negotiated communally, I think. And it's something that is passed on from human to human. And then like the subdivision of the notes, like you can digitally calculate how much swing you give to something, but a lot of subdivision in music comes from like a natural phenomenon of like physical things, like a shaker, and how the beads fall in the shaker is the swing of the thing. And that's so deterministic and so based on really subtle human movements.
Yeah, it's life.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we're going to learn the value of that complexity, I think, over time.
Mm-hmm.
That as much as we'll try to catch it in a net and probably commodify it, there's some, this is like every religious principle, I guess. It's like we are not allowed to do that. We're not allowed to figure out the whole thing from an omniscient perspective, and we never will. And it might just destroy us, the attempt to do so.
Yeah.
Probably will. I think that's what they say. But actually, let's end on a very boring question. And that's, who's the best drummer ever?
Who's the best drummer ever? Levon Helm of the band.
Okay.
Yeah.
You want to say why or no? You don't need to.
Deepest pocket, and the best drummers sing. He sings while he plays, and that's why he feels so good. He
feels good?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's so aware of the song that, just the space that he provides for everything and the propulsion that he gives everything in such a deliberate way, and how he's rooted in military drumming still.
All right, yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know who that is. I know the band
Mhm.
because of that one song.
The Weight, or
Yeah. Um, but I've never heard that name, so something to look into.
Mhm.
All right, let's move on with the day.
Cool, sweet. It's nice.
Good talking to you.
Thanks.
Peace. Music by Dori Bavarsky and Mingja Chen. I don't know who's next. We're doing it week to week now. Either way, it'll be good. Have a good week.